Mm.
So do you have any other tips that you would suggest to Patreon users to earn more money on their pages?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So yeah, I had a great session with our head of finance at Patreon. He was doing some office hours, and he was talking about a consulting framework where if as a consultant, you go into a company, you ask two questions. Is this company making money? And how's it losing money? So in terms of growing a Patreon, I think it's really smart podcasters to think about the top of their funnel, like how are they bringing people into the membership? And then the bottom of the funnel, like how am I retaining people within that membership? So it's not, you've built this bucket, let's make sure it's not leaking, and let's make sure there's good stuff coming in the top. So first bit, in terms of growing the membership, there's some tactics, data-backed tactics that we see working consistently well for podcasters and their memberships in terms of growing them. First, let's start with a principle. Make your membership part of the culture of your show. And by that, what I mean is that it's something that you always have something interesting to say about, that your fans know is a place that they go for exclusive content, where you're even cheeky and say something like, you know what, I think we're going to have to save this for the Patreon because this is going to be a bit too spicy for the real world. Or as you were saying, like, this has been such a great conversation. And as you all know, we're going to have 20 minutes more with this guest on the Patreon, where you can also get access to other really cool benefits like early access or a patron only merch or a patron only Discord. But make it part of the culture of your show so that it feels very organic when you're talking about it. And that's a really good principle for building the Patreon as well. Look at it and go, am I proud of this? Is this something I'm going to be able to integrate? Is it fun? Does it fit my culture? Is it going to fit me? Is it going to fit my guests and my fans? But yeah, make it part of the culture of your show so it doesn't stand out like it's an advert. So yeah, make it part of the culture. That's a principle. In terms of actual growth tactics, we've got some really good research on the best ways that creators, podcasters in particular, grow on the platform. So these tips are actually specific to podcasters. I'm going to refer to them in kind of like cute little pet names for tactics. The first one is the teaser tactic. And that's what we've just kind of talked about in terms of putting a little free taste out in the market. It's the pie shop. It's standing at the front and saying, here, have a free sample of my bonus episode that you get on my Patreon. And then when you've shared 5% of it, say, hey, if you want to hear the rest of this, go to patreon.com/your podcast name, where you can get access to that right now. That is by far and away the tactic I've seen work most consistently for podcasters in terms of growing their memberships. I think it's largely because you have access to an RSS feed. Like, this isn't just me kind of like blowing smoke here, but if you're publishing things in other environments which are algorithmically driven, a percentage of your fans will see that, but not all of them. Whereas if you built your podcast following up around an RSS feed, around people who are subscribed to you on Spotify or Apple or wherever it might be, by dropping a teaser into your feed, people are going to see that and they are going to hear that. So that's tip number one, teaser tactic. Tip number two for podcasters is doing a part one and a part two. What I mean by that is that you share the whole of your part one on your RSS feed. This is something that True Crime Obsessed do really well. They do the first part of a 2-part show. And at the end of part one, they say, you're going to be able to hear the rest of this story in a week's time here on the feed. Unless you want to hear it right now, in which case you can go to our Patreon where you can get access to part two right now, along with a bunch of other really cool bits of content and benefits. So that's a really strong way, again, of kind of giving people a taste of what they might be able to get when they get inside the Patreon. So that's tip number two is the part two tactic. So we've got the teaser tactic and the part two tactic. Third tip is one that you've mentioned already, Ashley, the extended episode, essentially. This is something that video podcasters called The Yards do really well. So The Yard have their podcast, and YouTube is one of the main places that they find their audience. And they do about 60 minutes that goes out for free. And then they do a bit of clickbait. They say like, hey, wasn't there that story you were going to tell us about your mom embarrassing you at your birthday party when you're 5 years old? And the person will be like, yeah, I mean, I'm going to tell that story, but I'm not going to tell it on YouTube. I want to tell it on Patreon. and they go and tell the rest of the story. They do another extended part of the episode for 30 minutes over there.